Goedemorgen en welkom allemaal bij deze bijzondere digitale bijeenkomst van de Vexpan. Ik zal me even voorstellen, mijn naam is Daniel Ditella en ik ben vandaag de moderator. En voordat ik straks het programma met jullie doorneem, vraag ik iedereen alvast om de microfoon uit te zetten en de camera aan te doen. Maar ik heb begrepen dat de meeste mensen dat wel gedaan hebben. Dus dat is mooi. Wat staat er op de agenda voor vandaag? Zoals ik al zei, het is een bijzondere meeting, want we gaan zo dadelijk beginnen met de ondertekening van het convenant Laadinfrastructuur in parkeergarages. Door de voorzitter van de Vexpan, André Wielaert, en de staatssecretaris van Infrastructuur en Waterstaat, Stientje van Veldhoven. Wil ik ook gelijk gebruik maken van de gelegenheid om mevrouw van Veldhoven namens de Vexpan alvast van harte welkom te heten. Na de ondertekening van dit convenant hebben we in aansluiting daarop een heel mooi moment een gastspreker uitgenodigd, Svenung Kwalo van de Norwegian Electric Car Association, om ons een presentatie te geven over de jarenlange ervaring die Noorwegen al heeft op het gebied van elektrisch rijden en laden. Goed om te weten is ook dat Noorwegen op dit moment het grootste aandeel heeft in het aantal geregistreerde voertuigen ter wereld. Laten we beginnen met het eerste deel, het eerste punt van onze agenda, de ondertekening van het convenant. En daarvoor wil ik graag het woord geven aan de voorzitter van de Vexpan, André Wielaert.
Goedemorgen Daniel. Goedemorgen alle bezoekers. En in het bijzonder welkom, alhoewel ik haar nog niet kan zien, mevrouw van Veldhoven. Ik neem aan dat u in de meeting bent, maar ik heb nog even geen beeld.
Ik weet niet of het wat beter is.
Ja, zo is het een stuk beter. Prima, welkom. Ja, we zijn blij dat u even wat tijd heeft kunnen vrijmaken voor het ondertekenen van het convenant, waar we de afgelopen tijd zo hard aan gewerkt hebben met een aantal mensen van uw ministerie. Maar voordat we doorgaan naar het officiële gedeelte, wil ik even kort stilstaan bij de ontstaansgeschiedenis van het convenant. En ik heb begrepen dat het allemaal begonnen is met een tweet naar u toe. En misschien dat u daar iets meer over kunt vertellen.
Ja, inderdaad. Volgens mij was het André. Ik weet niet wanneer, misschien, nou, ik weet niet precies wanneer. Maar in ieder geval, het balletje ging rollen door een bezoeker aan het ministerie. Viel op dat er geen laadpalen waren in de parkeergarage onder het ministerie. En nou is dat geen Rijksparkeergarage, maar wel natuurlijk een heel belangrijk signaal. En toen dacht ik, ja, hoe kan dat nou? Ik denk, daar moeten we wat aan doen. En dus toen was het inderdaad naar aanleiding eigenlijk van een signaal van de bezoeker. Dat ik dacht, we moeten eens eigenlijk met jullie organisatie om tafel om te kijken, wat is er nou nodig? Hoe kunnen we samen eigenlijk tot die opschaling komen? Parkeergarages zijn natuurlijk een ontzettend belangrijke plek voor heel veel mensen om te parkeren. Een belangrijke schakel in het gebruik van hun auto. Nou ja, en prachtig dat we samen met de branche op deze manier in actie zijn gekomen. Dus inderdaad, zo is het balletje gaan rollen.
Ja. Ja, en ja, misschien even voor alle toehoorders die zeg maar de afgelopen 1,5 jaar, we hebben onze leden daarover wel regelmatig geïnformeerd, maar misschien toch even goed om te weten hoe dat dan allemaal gelopen is. Want naar aanleiding van die bekende tweet is er vanuit het ministerie contact opgenomen met Vexpan. Met eigenlijk de vraag van, ja, hoe zouden we nou samen op kunnen trekken om zeg maar die uitrol van die laadinfrastructuur te versnellen. Wij hebben daarvoor in oktober 2019 met uw directeur mobiliteit destijds in Rotterdam een intentieverklaring ondertekend. En daarna zijn we gezamenlijk aan de gang gegaan om zeg maar het convenant vorm te geven, maar ook om een onderzoek te doen naar de status van de uitrol van die laadpalen op dit moment. Maar ook het ontwikkelen van een handreiking voor alle garagehouders, exploitanten, gemeenten, in het algemeen eigenaren van parkeergarages. Om te kunnen kijken van nou, wat is er nou allemaal nodig voor die uitrol van die laadpalen. En we hebben daarbij ook een rekentool ontwikkeld waarbij op basis van een aantal variabelen kan worden bepaald hoeveel laadpalen er nou nodig zijn nu en in de toekomst om aan die toenemende vraag van laadpalen te kunnen voldoen. Nou, die handreiking die hebben we in oktober 2020 gepubliceerd. Die is ook te vinden op de website van Vexpan en bij INW. En ja, daarna zijn we aan de slag gegaan met het convenant. Ja, wij zijn zeer blij dat we dat vandaag kunnen gaan ondertekenen. Maar ik heb om te beginnen nog even een paar vragen aan u. En om te beginnen, waarom is elektrisch rijden in Nederland op dit moment zo belangrijk?
Nou, eigenlijk kunnen we elektrisch rijden niet loszien van de enorme klimaatopgave waar we voor staan. En ik denk, dat is in ieder geval de overtuiging waarmee ik aan de slag ben gegaan. In deze grootste uitdaging van onze tijd is er niet één partij die dit op kan lossen. Het is niet zo dat we kunnen zeggen, nou als die partij nou eens even de sleutel om zou zetten of het gedrag om zou zetten, dan hebben we dit grote probleem opgelost. Het is een wicked problem in de zin dat er heel veel partijen zijn die eigenlijk heel veel moeten doen. Maar de positieve kant daarvan is dat ook iedereen kan bijdragen. En dus ook mobiliteit is in Nederland een gigantische opgave. En wij reizen wat af, we zijn een heel mobiel volkje, heb ik wel eens gezegd. We reizen 13.000 keer rond de wereld. Dus onze mobiliteit is ook een hele grote bron van CO2-uitstoot. En dus het verduurzamen van die mobiliteit is gewoon een enorme belangrijke opgave voor het halen van de klimaatdoelstellingen van Parijs. Dat zien we ook in het klimaatakkoord.
Dan is het wel handig om 1 of 2 reserveautomaten te hebben.
Daar kwam even een vraag tussendoor, maar kunnen we misschien zo meteen beantwoorden. Dus de opgave is gewoon heel erg groot. Daar zijn heel veel partijen voor nodig. Maar uiteindelijk gaat het erom natuurlijk dat mensen denken, hey, ik vind het interessant om ook over te stappen op zo'n elektrische auto. En wat zien we dan dat heel bepalend is voor de keuze om over te kunnen stappen, is eigenlijk de vraag, kan ik dan wel laden? Dat blijkt dus, de prijs gaat enorm omlaag. Het rijden is natuurlijk lachen aan de pomp als je moet gaan tanken. Dus dat is allemaal heel positief. Maar mensen willen zeker weten, ja, heb ik dan wel genoeg laadpalen? En als ik dan met mijn auto de stad in ga naar zo'n parkeergarage, ja, kan ik die tijd dan ook benutten om te laden? Dus echt ontzettend belangrijk, denk ik, voor het gevoel van vertrouwen. Dat er dus in heel Nederland met de branche op deze manier plekken komen in die parkeergarages. Zodat mensen ook weten, als ik lekker even aan het winkelen ben, wordt mijn auto opgeladen. Dus een ontzettend belangrijke toevoeging.
En u refereert al even aan het klimaatakkoord. Als u op dit moment moet inschatten hoe ver wij zijn, liggen wij op dit moment als Nederland op schema?
Ja, we liggen absoluut op schema wat betreft de mobiliteit. Dat was natuurlijk, waren eigenlijk 2 onderdelen van het klimaatakkoord waar ik zelf de verantwoordelijkheid voor had. Zowel in de onderhandelingen als ook in de uitvoering. Dat was mobiliteit en circulaire economie. En we hebben een hele mix aan maatregelen. En als je daar doorheen kijkt, misschien de afgelopen periode ook wat meer berichtjes her en der gezien, liggen we zeker op schema. Je ziet dat Nederland echt een grote bereidheid heeft om die overstap te gaan maken naar elektrisch rijden. Het aantal stekkerauto's is in 4 jaar echt enorm gestegen. Van 21.000 in 2017 naar 150.000 in 2020. En ook de laadinfra is enorm snel toegenomen. We hebben recent de emissieloze zones voor logistiek aangekondigd. Dat is een doelstelling die we in 2025 30 tot 40 wilden halen. We gaan gewoon waarschijnlijk voor de zomer al op de 30 steden komen in Nederland die daarvoor gaan. Dat is ook niet gek, want er zitten heel veel co-benefits aan. Schone lucht, minder uitstoten in die binnensteden, meer ruimte, minder geluid. Dus daar zijn we heel hard mee aan de slag. Emissieloze bussen. In 2020 gingen we over de 1000 uitstootvrije bussen in Nederland. Zo'n 20%. 4 jaar geleden was dat nog maar 4%. Dus je ziet dat eigenlijk op al die sectoren, in al die segmenten, ja, zit echt nu de vaart erin. Zijn we echt naar volgende versnelling gegaan. En daarbij kunnen dan natuurlijk de parkeergarages niet ontbreken. Het is ook fantastisch dat jullie gewoon in diezelfde flow, in diezelfde snelheid eigenlijk mee aan het ontwikkelen zijn. Zo bouwen we met elkaar die infrastructuur.
Nou, dat is goed om te horen dat we in ieder geval op schema liggen. Dan even in uw woorden. Waarom dit convenant en wat is wat u betreft het belangrijkste doel van het convenant?
Nou, wat ik net al zei, voor een consument of ook voor een zakelijke rijder om over te stappen op elektrisch, is de vraag waar en wanneer kan ik laden cruciaal. En dan ben je er niet met de goede voornemens van 1 stad of van 1 regio. Het gaat echt over het gevoel van vrijheid, dat je diezelfde vrijheid hebt met je elektrische auto als dat je hebt met een benzineauto, waarvan je ook weet dat je niet op elke hoek van de straat kunt tanken, maar dat je wel weet dat er een heel goed dekkend landelijk netwerk is waar je eigenlijk altijd terecht kunt. En het doel van dit convenant is nou juist om parkeergaragehouders, parkeergarage-eigenaren, betrokken gemeenten en andere organisaties allemaal met elkaar te gaan zorgen voor dat landelijk dekkende netwerk. Met dus voldoende mogelijkheden, geen schaarste, maar ook geen witte vlekken. En dat is eigenlijk wat er echt nodig is om die transitie echt te maken. Zodat je zeker weet dat waar je ook in Nederland naartoe gaat, in die parkeergarages er altijd plekken zijn waar je kunt laden. Zodat je niet die onzekerheid hebt bij de keuze voor een elektrische auto. En we zien dat de ontwikkeling van de laadinfrastructuur in Nederland razendsnel gaat. Maar de parkeergarages zijn daarin echt een hele belangrijke schakel.
En hoe zou volgens u de branche dat met partijen zoals overheden en particuliere exploitanten, gemeentelijke exploitanten, hoe zouden wij dat moeten realiseren, denkt u?
Maar een van de dingen waar Nederland echt goed in is mijn ervaring, ook als ik dat vergelijk met mijn internationale collega's, is om alle benodigde partijen samen aan tafel te brengen. Want ik merk heel erg vaak dat als ik met partijen spreek, dat ze zeggen, ik wil wel, maar... En dan achter de maar komt eigenlijk, dan heb ik ook iets nodig van iemand anders. En dat kunnen we allemaal in ons eentje proberen tot stand te brengen. Dat kost dan vaak veel tijd. Krijgen we niet de snelheid die we nodig hebben. Maar juist door al die partijen bij elkaar te brengen, dit samen te doen, kunnen we kennis delen. Zie je ook dat anderen ermee aan de slag gaan. Dus het is ook heel vaak, het helpt ook bij het tempo krijgen. En voldoende tempo maken. Dat het wiel niet opnieuw hoeft te worden uitgevonden. Dat er kan worden gedacht in kansen en oplossingen. Bekendheid worden vergroot. Het bericht dat je straks in heel Nederland in de parkeergarages ook kunt laden, is natuurlijk veel effectiever dan dat elke parkeergarage apart moet gaan zeggen, hey, ik heb laadpalen. Dus zo versterk je met elkaar het geluid. Je versterkt met elkaar het beeld. Maar je versterkt ook de snelheid die je kunt maken met elkaar. En ik denk wat dat betreft ook de kennisbank en de handreikingen, waar net al aan gerefereerd werd, echt cruciaal zijn. Samen kunnen we sneller en verder komen. Dus ik hoop ook dat jullie zoveel mogelijk leden kunnen betrekken bij het convenant. En ook eventueel nog niet aangesloten parkeergaragehouders. Dat die echt zeggen, wij gaan meedoen. Want ik denk dat dat cruciaal is voor de verdere doorontwikkeling van elektrisch rijden in Nederland.
Nou, wij gaan in ieder geval als organisatie daar de komende jaren ons best voor doen, samen met de mensen van het ministerie. En wij hopen ook, we hebben een aantal doelstellingen geformuleerd in het convenant. Die zullen we ook, die zijn natuurlijk voor een groot gedeelte al bekend, maar die zullen we de komende week ook aan onze leden nogmaals bekendmaken. Ja, ik denk dat de toelichting heel erg duidelijk is. En ik zou eigenlijk willen voorstellen om over te gaan tot het zetten van de officiële handtekening.
Ja.
Ik hoop dat u het document voor zich heeft liggen. Ik heb het wel. Dus ik ga hem nu tekenen.
Ik ook.
Wij hebben hem aan beide kanten officieel ondertekend. Nogmaals dank voor ten eerste het vertrouwen, ten tweede de samenwerking. Ik wil in ieder geval toch even de gelegenheid nemen om 2 mensen van uw ministerie even heel specifiek te bedanken. Dat zijn de mensen die het afgelopen jaar, 1,5 jaar, waar ik zelf intensief contact mee heb gehad. Vexpan Mortezij en Richard Hovinga, die hier heel erg dichtbij betrokken zijn geweest. En als laatste even aan u nog de vraag, wilt u nog iets toevoegen of ons iets meegeven?
Ik sluit me vooral heel erg graag aan bij de complimenten die zijn gegeven. Inderdaad, wij mogen hier mooi de handtekening zetten, maar daar is altijd heel veel werk door heel veel mensen aan verricht voordat dat het geval is. En zonder al die gedreven en harde inzet van alle mensen om oplossingen te vinden, zouden we ook nooit zo'n handtekening kunnen zetten. Dus heel veel dank daarvoor. En ik hoop ook dat we echt volop aan de slag gaan nu met de uitvoering van het convenant. Daar zullen we elkaar nog veel bij nodig hebben. Maar het mooie, zoals ik net al zei, wat ik vind van Nederland is, we weten met elkaar om tafel te gaan. En samen kunnen we allemaal op onze eigen plek onze steen bijdragen aan het tegengaan van die grote uitdaging waar we voor staan. En ik ben er ontzettend trots op dat ook de parkeergarages in Nederland op deze manier zeggen, dit is onze bijdrage, wij gaan ook voor het halen van de klimaatdoelstellingen. En samen kunnen we dat mogelijk maken. Ontzettend veel dank.
Nou, dat lijkt me een mooie afsluiter. Nogmaals, dank voor uw aanwezigheid. U bent natuurlijk van harte uitgenodigd om de presentatie zo meteen ook te volgen. Maar ik kan me voorstellen dat daar mogelijk een agendaprobleem ligt.
Ja, helaas. Zal dat niet gaan. Nog een hele fijne bijeenkomst.
Prima, dank u wel en heel graag tot ziens. Fijne
ziens.
dag. Tot ziens.
Tot ziens.
Ja, dan wil ik voor het vervolg graag het woord geven aan Daniel. En ik blijf zelf zeker meekijken, want ik denk dat we een heel interessant verhaal uit Noorwegen te horen krijgen. Nogmaals, iedereen heel erg bedankt voor dit stukje aanwezigheid. Maar het meest interessante stuk, dat gaat nu volgen, want we hebben nu net afgesproken wat we gaan doen. Maar de meneer na mij die kan ons gaan vertellen hoe we het zouden kunnen doen. Daniel.
Dankjewel André, dankjewel. Voordat wij toch zo dadelijk gaan beginnen met de presentatie uit Noorwegen, vind ik het toch eigenlijk wel even een digitaal applausje waard. Dus ik zou iedereen willen vragen om de microfoon heel eventjes open te zetten en een kort applausje te geven voor dit bijzondere moment. Goed, dan gaan wij zo beginnen met de presentatie uit Noorwegen. En omdat deze presentatie in het Engels is, ga ik nu overschakelen naar deze taal, as good as it gets. So, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this special webinar of the Vexpan. Before I give the floor to our special guest speaker, Sveinung Kvalo from the Norwegian Electric Car Association, I would like to go through some important rules that apply during this presentation. Rule number 1 is to use headphones so that you are not bothered by ambient noise. Rule number 2 is during the meeting, turn off the microphone and turn the camera on. And the third rule is if you have a question, you can ask it in the chat, and during a short break in about 30 minutes and at the end of the presentation, Sveinung will try to answer all questions. And I will call the name of the person who asked the question in the chat, so he or she can turn the microphone back on for asking the question personally. Okay, let's start with the presentation. Sveinung, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Daniel. So I'll just start with sharing my screen. So do you see my presentation now?
No, not yet.
Okay, I'll try one more time.
It has to come from far, so maybe it needs more time. Huh?
What about now?
Yes.
Yeah, we can see
Yeah, we can.
the PowerPoint, but with the framing around it. Yeah.
Perfect. Always some technical troubles in these times with these kind of meetings. But I'm really happy. Good morning to you all, and I'm really happy to be invited to speak to you. I represent the Norwegian EV Association, and I've been working with electric mobility since 2013, but started in the EV Association last year. We are a non-profit NGO established 25 years ago, so we have long experience. We also have a lot of members, 85,000, which makes us the largest EV owner association in the world. And we are member funded and owned, and we have 37 employees. So the schedule for today, I'll talk about different things. I've been asked to talk about all aspects of the EVs in Norway and also explain a little bit about our success. But since it's a long presentation, we'll have a break where we allow for questions and answers 2 times. So as you can see, first I will say a little bit about the background of us and also a little bit about our EV driver survey before I go on to some other themes which is more relevant for you, which is EV fires and charging and parking. So first, just say a little bit about our country. Our language is a bit similar to Dutch, so we can understand quite a lot by reading Dutch newspapers, but unfortunately I didn't understand much during the Vice Minister's dialogue with Andre. But I understand that she undertook a new pact of parking garages, charging in parking garages. Anyway, to talk about Norway, we are 5.4 million people with 2.8 million cars. Our electricity is 98% renewable, so it's a perfect place to have electric vehicles. We also we are a large oil exporter, so and it's a cold country, so not everything says that we should be an EV country. But I took in the state of Alaska in US to see how far north is actually Norway. And as you can see, the dotted line on the top is 78 degrees north, which is similar to the most northern part of Alaska. And if you compare those, the red and the dark blue regions, it's the northernmost regions in Norway and Alaska. And that's interesting because we had a winter test this year was in this region, which is most far north of the country. So here's the picture from 71 degrees north. It was really cold. It was the first week of January, and we had temperatures down to -20 degrees. And we tested 5 different cars. And what has happened recently in this county is that we have built up a new network of fast chargers. So now we have fast chargers available for the whole country. And wherever you want to go in Norway, you can be covered and get your car filled up with electricity wherever you are. So no matter if you're what county you're in or how cold it is. We are really proud of the development in Norway because over 12% of our total fleet is battery electric. If you include plug-in hybrids, we're almost on 500,000. But of course, we still have over 2 million ICE cars that need to be replaced. So we still have a way to go. When you look at the share of new cars, it reached over 50% for the first time in 2020, which means that most of new buyers within a whole year prefers battery electric cars in Norway. And this is for personal cars. If you look at the commercial cars, light vans, it's been lagging a lot behind, but we had real good numbers for January, which is 21%, but still lagging behind personal cars. And as I said, we still have a way to go to reach 2.8 million. And of course, since people own cars for, on average in Norway for 18 years, it will take a long time to replace all cars, even if we have 100% sales of battery electric. And on vans, of course, it's only 10,000 of 500,000. So longer way to go. It's also interesting to see what are the popular models, because in the early years, we saw that the small cars were dominating the EV market, but that was because there were little cars in the larger segment of cars. But now the most popular car for 2020 was quite expensive Audi e-tron. But this is exactly what we have been waiting for: larger family cars, which we can use, which we can have as the only car in the household, and we can travel as far as we want with it. Also, Tesla Model 3 and the Volkswagen ID.3 has a new level of range, which we didn't have on electric cars only a few years ago. I also wanted to compare Norway with the Netherlands, because you have also had some impressive results on EV sales. And it was also quite surprising for us that when we had our record month in December with 67% battery electric vehicles, you actually beat us with 69%. And that's really amazing for a country like the Netherlands, because everybody knows that our subsidies are a bit higher than everybody else's subsidies. But I also have heard that you have typically you have expiring policies at the end of each year. And you typically have a spike in December. But still, your record of sales for 1 month is higher than our record. So now let me talk to how did we get to this point. And this is actually the North Cape, the northernmost point where we had this photo opportunity for our winter test in January. But I'm not talking about the North Cape, I'm talking about where we are in the Norwegian market. So let me first explain, when did we introduce these policies, and why are the policies in Norway so much different from many other countries? And the reason is, as in many other countries, is that we wanted to have an industry. I think we are quite envious on our Swedish neighbors who have a big auto industry. And in the 90s, we saw the opportunity for electric vehicles to come and maybe establish car manufacturing in Norway, but with electric vehicles instead of traditional ICE vehicles. So as you can see in the picture, the red and the yellow car on the left were Norwegian prototypes of electric cars, and all the policies were that was introduced were a collaboration between the environmental NGOs and the battery electric car industry. So, and I think that's what was triggering the politician most at that time, was the potential to build up new industry of car manufacturing in Norway. So as you can see, already in 1990, electric vehicles were exempt from the purchase tax, which is quite high in Norway. Also know that you have a quite high purchase tax in the Netherlands. In 1997, we got state requirement to have no road toll on our roads. And also free municipal parking was regulated, decided upon by state authority. So no municipal, none of the municipals or the cities could take parking fees from electric vehicles. Also, we have some benefits in the tax regulation when it comes to company cars. So you pay less tax when you have a company car if it's electric. And also maybe the most important policy came in 2001 with removing the VAT from electric vehicles. And a little bit later, we had access to bus lanes for electric vehicles in 2005. And my point is that all these policies, which are decisively all the policies in Norway for electric vehicles, they came before we had any significant sales of electric vehicles. And in this period from 2010 to 2000 up until now, we haven't really had any significant changes in the purchase incentives for electric vehicles. So what we have seen, and the reason for the uptake of electric vehicles, is because of the development of cars and the improvements in battery technology and electric vehicles, and also the expanding range of models which has come on the market. And I think it's really interesting to note that last year, I think before 2020, there were typically like 1 to 2 new models every year when it came to electric vehicles. But in 2020, there were 20 to 30 new models introduced in the market. And the same also for 2021. So now things are really starting to happen in the production of electric cars and the variety of cars that you can get. And that is the reason why the sales of electric cars have exploded in Norway. But of course, we wouldn't have been there without those policies that were introduced in this period from 1990 to 2005. And sadly, our effort to establish a car industry in Norway didn't succeed. So they all, both of those cars went bankrupt, and even if they were up till several times actually, and they were eventually bought up by Ford and another big OEM. But now this is history, and the politicians decided to keep the policies for environmental reasons. And of course, as I have briefly mentioned, especially the purchase tax and the zero VAT, no purchase tax and zero VAT is the main explanations, main factors why we have why electric vehicles are quite cheap in Norway. And I think it's also, I also want to just be clear that these cars aren't cheap, but the technology is more expensive. But when they don't have any purchase tax and there's zero VAT, that's enough to make the price on the same level as traditional ICE cars, because the volume production makes traditional cars very cheap to produce, and the low production of electric cars have made them, and use of new technology have made them expensive. But we are able to align the price difference with these policies. Also, I mentioned we have a reduced annual road tax. It was actually exempted from annual road tax until last year. It was introduced 1st of January 2021. So that's a new policy. Now, electric vehicle owners almost have to pay the full yearly annual road tax. We still have 60% reduced valuation of electric vehicles when you have it as a company car, reducing the tax benefit. And also we have starting to introduce toll roads and parking fees for electric vehicles, which was free before. But the parliament, they have set a rule that you only are allowed as a municipality to have, or for the state, to have a max 50% fee for electric vehicles compared to fossil vehicles or ICE cars. Also, we have introduced some restrictions to the bus lanes. So on the roads with most traffic, we have seen that there are so many electric vehicles now that they are reducing the efficiency of buses, and that's why we have on those roads with most traffic, we have introduced a rule that you have to have a passenger in your electric vehicle if you want to use the bus lane. So the problem of reducing the efficiency for the buses is solved with that rule. Also, we are having other laws and regulations, which is a charging right for apartment buildings. If you move into an apartment, you still need to be able to charge your car when it's parked. And we have introduced several new rules in our regulations that gives the owners a charging right. And there are also local support schemes for parking garages, especially in Oslo. That is important. Also, there is a renewed force on public procurements, which says that all cars bought by state and municipalities needs to be zero-emission vehicles by 2022. And from 2025, the same applies to city buses. And also, I think one of the maybe most important, but also most known in other countries is our 2025 ZEV mandate, that all new passenger cars and light vans sold in 2025 shall be zero-emission vehicles. And this was decided by the Parliament in 2017, and is a clear goal for us to have no new cars with emissions from 2025 and onwards. So this target is quite bold, but we also see other countries following up with targets, but we haven't seen. We have only seen 2030 and 2035, and there's no ongoing discussion if there should be a ZEV mandate for the whole EU. I know that Netherlands have a ZEV mandate also. And of course, these policies wouldn't have been possible without broad political support. We have seen that new policies have been introduced from ministers from the whole spectrum of parties in power, and we've seen alternating governments from the left and the right side, but still these EV policies have remained stable. We see that there's starting to be disagreements about the policies now. It's quite expensive when 50% of the cars are sold without any VAT. So there are discussions of introducing how to introduce VAT also on electric vehicles. So that's an interesting discussion going on here in Norway right now. Of course, challenges forward is how will the policy measures change and how fast? Also, what will happen with the cars? We see a wide range of cars coming in, and we're also seeing that the price is lowering. But still, it's quite expensive to buy electric vehicles, and we believe that a full introduction of VAT and purchase tax will destroy the EV market in Norway as well. And how are the consumers changing? We see that there, as we know more, get more knowledge and facts about electric vehicles, it's becoming more popular within a wide range of the population. And also the charging network, how does it work? Is there a good market development? Do we still need to support public support to build new chargers? And also the local charging network, which I will come back to later. The only thing we know for sure is that the current policies will last only this year. That's what has been promised. But still, we have this strong 2025 goal, which actually needs, we have documentation that we need further policies to be able to reach that goal. And we still need a larger selection of cars and more low-priced cars. As I told you, a lot of new models are coming on the market, but we're maybe still missing the cheap family cars with a lot of luggage space. So it's interesting to see that it's the Chinese brands who are actually maybe the first ones who are offering that kind of vehicles to a low price. And that's the BYD, Xpeng, and others. Also, I think since we have been in this game for such a long time, and we had a lot of members also for a long time, we know a lot about the typical EV owner. We have, for at least 15 years, we have conducted an annual survey by our members. And the last survey was conducted in April 2020 with more than 14,000 respondents. So it gives us a lot of knowledge about our EV drivers. And I'll just go through some of the main findings, which I found relevant for you. And I think the most striking is how satisfied EV owners are with their car. So 94% say they are satisfied or very satisfied with their EV. 71% of the respondents are first-time EV owners. And typically they also buy a new car. And this is new that we see that a lot of the members have EVs as their only vehicle. They don't have any ICE cars. So 45% only have EVs in their household. And we didn't see this number before because the electric vehicle was typically the second car in a household. Uh, 85% were positively surprised by the abilities of their EV. 14% often experience range anxiety, so still they're not as good as ICE cars when it comes to range. 8% say that the battery capacity has been noticeably reduced, so there is quite some deterioration of the battery during the lifetime of the car. And 60% often experience fear of queue, because it's not only about range, how long will it take you, but also.
Dat ik het met jou ongeveer begrijp.
Yeah, I can take questions in the break. Be a break quite soon.
Short break for question round number 1, if it's okay with you, Sveno.
Yeah, I'll just have one more slide.
I've seen a lot of questions in the chat. So first, let's start with Siebold Mulder. 2 questions I've seen from Siebold Mulder. So the floor is yours, Siebold, to ask the question.
Okay. Well, my question was, since cheap cars are so important, how is the used car market developing? In Holland, most consumers buy a used car and not a new car.
Yeah,
so how is that developing?
I think this is interesting because we get a lot of criticism that the support scheme is only for rich people, because only rich people can afford new cars. But of course, it's the obvious. If you don't have if the rich people who actually buy new cars don't buy electric vehicles, there won't be no second-hand market. And so typically, you will own a car for at least 3 years before you sell it. And that's also reflected in the used car market. But we've now seen that it's starting to grow quite rapidly. Of course, with maybe a 3 years lag. But it's quite a good second-hand market in Norway right now. But of course, these are also typically second car in the households, low range batteries, and older technology. So, but we all depend on 100% electric vehicle new sales in order to get a functioning second-hand market.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and then we can go to Bastijn. He has also 2 questions. So Bastijn, the floor is yours.
Ik denk dat Bastijn zijn microfoon moet ook openzetten.
Hopefully, can you hear me now?
Yes. We can.
Okay, yeah, my laptop didn't allow me to speak. Sorry for that. So now by phone. Yeah, I had 2 questions. First, I saw a slight decline in the impressive growth, and was still at the beginning of the presentation. So I was wondering whether this was a result of the general COVID pandemic and reduced sales in general, or that there are any other reasons, for example, the change in the incentive schemes. So, and my other question was regarding the charging infrastructure and the safety. Is the charging infrastructure developing at the same pace, and how are people experiencing that? So you already shared some views on the range anxiety. So what is charging infrastructure doing in that regard? And I was also wondering how about the safety issues? We have this persistent myth that EVs and charging infrastructure is supposedly unsafe, which we didn't find any evidence also after extensive research. So I was wondering, how are you dealing with these questions, and do you have any statistics on safety and in particular fire incidents?
Yeah, I'll talk a lot about charging and fires in the second part, but I can give you some short information about that. When it comes to the first questions, the slowing down that we saw in January, we really don't know yet why, but it was a huge increase in the end of 2020. But we also saw that there was a drop in electric vehicles due to COVID in March and April, but with a great recovery in the second half of the year. So really, people were insecure during the first months, but now it seems to be a fully recovered market, and especially for battery electric vehicles. What we have seen in the market the last months, in January and February, is quite a steep decline from last second half of 2020. And one thing is that we had an introduction of annual tax, which is about 200 euros per year for electric vehicles, and there was no similar increase for ICE cars. So that's changed a relative advantage for ICE cars because they didn't have any change. Originally, the government planned to increase some of the taxes also on ICE cars to have a balance, and I think that would have been wise. But they, in a last-minute budget negotiation, we lost the increases on ICE cars. So I think that may be an explanation. But we also have very beneficial tax schemes for plug-in hybrids. And we see that there is a large increase of plug-in hybrid sales. So they have actually had record sales in January and February. And we are starting to doubt if this is such a good idea to keep these very good incentives for plug-in hybrids. We've also seen some critical reports from Transport and Environment showing that the emissions from plug-in hybrids is actually much higher than what they have in their registration papers, and actually what also the taxes are based on. When it comes to charging infrastructure, we have seen an improvement actually when it comes to the number of fast chargers per car. So it seems that right now the development of fast chargers is actually a little bit faster than the development of electric vehicle sales. And I think this is because obviously Tesla had a lot of success with their model, with building up a very good infrastructure for long travels with their fast charging network. And we have seen other car producers are like the Ionity, the car manufacturers behind Ionity are seeing that it's in their interest to build a good network to be able to sell more cars. But also we see independent charging operators building a lot of chargers, and it seems to be a good and viable market for that, especially near and in densely populated areas. But as I said, I'll come back to this and our policies on it a little bit in the second half of the presentation. When it comes to the fire safety issues, we know that there are fewer fires per electric vehicles than there are per ICE car. Of course, we know that a lot of the fires on cars are it's easier to set a petrol car on fire, and a lot of these fires we see are actually the cars are put on fire by riots, by youths, by people with sicknesses. We really don't want to talk so much about people who are putting cars on fires, because we know that this triggers more cars to be set on fire. So we actually don't know the real statistics of self-fires, that it's something wrong with the vehicle that causes the fire. But I think it's a good thing that it's more difficult to do is to put an electric vehicle on fire than a petrol car. But as I said, I will come back to this in the second part.
Thank you.
Okay, Sveno, because of the time, do you agree when we continue with part number 2 of your presentation, and then we're going to start with round number 2, or the last round of questions. Is that okay with you?
Yeah, that's okay.
Okay.
Yeah. So the last thing I wanted to show was that it's quite many who say that they use the EV for everyday trips. It's 87%. And work-related is a lot less. So let's come back to the theme of EV fires, and I understood that this is also a hot topic in the Netherlands. Last year there was a massive fire at the airport at one of our biggest cities in Stavanger, and some witnesses claim that the fire started in a battery electric vehicle. And this spread like fire in the media that an EV caused this fire. And we said that, well, let's wait and see until we can be sure. So we wanted to have a close examination of this. And this was a huge fire. More than 1,600 cars were involved. Several hundreds of cars were badly damaged, and the parking facility itself needs to be rebuilt. And it did parts of it did actually collapse. And this there has been done a research report by a company called RISE, and they point out several mistakes which is due to how the parking garage is actually built. So it turned out after like maybe 5 to 6 hours or so, it was clear that this was actually an ICE car. It was an old Opel Zafira, and it was a diesel car that caught fire immediately after ignition. But the public damage on electric vehicles was already done because it was still circulating and still circulates in social media that this fire was actually caused by an electric vehicle. Even if we knew quite quickly it started in an ICE car. And even if it was stated that it was an ICE car who started the fire, there was a large debate on the fire risk of electric vehicles, and also a lot of fire officers went out in the media and say that they're anxious about the new technology. It can give trouble. It can easily start to burn, and especially this. What about parking garages and below surface level? Should you not allow electric vehicles to park? So this discussion started regardless of the facts of this fire. And also it went international, viral, international, and you could still find that this fire was actually caused by an electric vehicle, even if it wasn't. And also one of our insurance companies went out in media and warned about electric vehicles and their fire potential, and naming them fire bombs. So we were very critical, and we were on national television arguing with this insurance company. But I think we have worked a long time with the official fire authorities. We have several reports and a lot of facts on these issues, and together with the national fire authorities, we know that on this fire, the battery electric vehicles did not affect the fire development in a different way than ICE cars. And what we can learn from this is that misconceptions, they spread easily in the media, and especially in social media. And it's hard to strike down a misleading media focus. And I think it's they who write about this, they need to be correctly informed about the facts. So to have a knowledge-based focus is really, really important. And we see that the authorities have it, we have it. And of course, similar incidents may occur in other countries as well. And our conclusion is that even if it's difficult to put an electric vehicle on fire, we still need more research. There are still a lot of uncertainties. We know that a lot of people, they charge on regular sockets, which they shouldn't, because that's a risk of fire. But with the proper charging facilities, we know that the risk of fire is low or almost non-existent. So we cooperate actively with the national authorities. And I think it's really important that they take a coordinating role. So because we see that a lot of local fire departments, they can go out and warn about a risk which is totally based on myths and not facts. We had an incident during COVID where we had this ice skating hall. They showed a drive-in movie, and the local fire authorities, they said that people with the electric vehicles, they shouldn't come to this indoor film drive-in film. But we quickly took contact with the local fire department and with those who were having this responsible for showing the movie. And it's quite clear that in such when you have a car indoor, it's a bigger risk to have cars with petrol, and they also have a lot of pollution for an indoor facility. So actually electric vehicles are much better for such a showing a movie inside a large arena. And they also they changed their recommendation, the local police department, after talking to the national authorities. Okay, so over to charging. And as you can see, sometimes it can be a struggle to charge your car, especially with the winter conditions you have in Norway. But even if it looks a bit snowy, this car is actually charging well, even if a lot of snow has come on the side of the charger. So I think it's really important to separate between normal charging and fast charging, because it's two quite different types of charging. With normal charging, you have a much lower speed. It's for charging your car when you are parked, and you don't need the speeds that you see on fast chargers. And for a long time, the fast charger standard has been 50 kilowatts, but we now see that the new standard is from 150 to 300 kilowatts. Even if there is still few cars who can handle such high speeds. When you look at the average share of charging, 78% of all charging is being done at homes, while only 9% is on fast charging stations. And I think also this picture is very important, showing that over 60% of the EV drivers, they charge on fast charging stations less than monthly or never. And only around 7 to 8% they use fast chargers on a weekly basis or more often. So this shows that fast charging stations are mostly used on when you're traveling long distance, and traveling long distance is typically a thing you don't do on a regular basis, but mostly on vacations. Still, 84% use fast charging, so it's an important element of the traveling experience for EV owners. So you use it quite seldom, but most of us use it, especially when you only have one car in your household. You need a fast charging network to be there. And when it comes to where do you charge the most, it's only 15% who are doing the fast charging where they actually live. So this is mostly on longer trips outside the municipality or county. We also asked people how they experience the fast charging sessions. And 68% see these as natural pauses that you need anyway, so that you can have you can charge your car while and it's a necessary break from driving, and you can stretch your legs and you can use the toilet, you can eat. This is things you need to do on a long trip anyways. But of course, also 25% say that it's an unnecessary break, and this is not something they want to spend time on. So this is a little bit of a difference maybe from ICE cars. At least the number is higher, because you also need to stop to fill up your petrol car if you go on a longer trip. In Norway, we saw that there was the level of funding used on fast charging is actually quite low, because this is since people pay for fast charging, and the fast charging operators, they really don't need that much support. But some areas are challenging, especially in rural areas. It may not be profitable to put up a charger, and we can see that there's very little use of those chargers, typically only on holidays, and especially some places in along the national road network. They are typically only used in like summer and Easter. So of course it's really expensive to put up chargers, and you don't really want to charge the EV drivers what it actually costs. And I think it's maybe in these areas where you can't get a market to function. You still need to have chargers there, and you may need a support scheme, national support scheme, to put fast chargers everywhere where they are needed. In Norway, we have had a national plan, and the plan was to have fast chargers along the whole network of the main roads, and have fast charging stations at every 50 kilometers. And this reflects that this is only necessary for the longer trips. And fast charging stations in the cities, we see it's not that big a need for it, but there's some need. But these charging stations are typically commercially viable, so they don't need support. So in Norway, we have 17,000 publicly accessible charging points, where 3,350 are the fast charging network, reflecting how many can charge at the same time. Now we have 350,000 electric vehicles, and we have around 3,500 chargers. In 2025, we will have 1 million electric vehicles, and we estimated that we need around 9,600 fast chargers. So this means we need to build over 1,000 fast chargers every year to keep up with the sales of electric vehicles if we want to reach our 2025 target. And I think there's a really interesting discussion between parking and charging, because we are often discussing how many public chargers do we need. And we know that the Alternative Fuels Infrastructure Directive in the EU recommends 1 charger per 10 electric cars. But we think that the question and the recommendation by the directive doesn't make sense, because it all depends on parking availability and different types of charging. We know that 95% in Norway have their own parking spot. And this is and the home charging is the backbone of the charging network. And most of households, since they have their own parking spot, they have the opportunity to put up their own charger for the bulk of the charging that they need for this car. It's only for typically for long trips where you need fast charging opportunity. When it comes to home charging, we see that 27% use a regular socket. And this is a little bit scary because it actually has a risk of fire if you don't do it carefully. But with the charging box, you could actually eliminate the risk of fire to nearly zero. And already now, 69% have made this investment to have a charging box. This number was a lot lower only a couple of years ago. So, and also there has been changes in the law that makes it illegal to use a regular socket on a regular basis in Norway. When it comes to the different types of charging, I think this is a really interesting point, because when the car is parked at home, and typically overnight, this is when people want to charge the car. This includes a public charging network for residents who don't have their own parking spot or don't have charging opportunity on their parking spot. And I know that this is quite different from the Netherlands, because you have a lot less individual parking spaces. You have a lot more shared parking spaces. So of course, how many public chargers you need depends on whether people are dependent on charging on the street or not. Destination charging, that's the type of charging when you're not at home, but still the car is parked. It can include charging at work, when you're visiting a hotel, being at a restaurant or a shopping mall, or similar. And then it comes to fast charging, which is a total different type of charging. And it's typically along the road and traveling long distance, but also convenient for the occasional need to fill up quickly. And also some who don't have, when there's not a publicly available charging network, some may also use fast charging on a regular basis. But we know that this is not good for the battery. It will deteriorate the battery quicker. And also, it's not a desired option for most of the EV owners. When people are fast charging, there's no desire for parking, maybe a short break, and typically with a snack or a meal on the long distance travels. But the point is that people want this type of charging to take as short time as possible, while home charging and destination charging, you don't need high speeds to charge your car as much as you need to travel by the car. So that's the end of my second part of the presentation, and I'll open up for questions. And also, this is a picture from our winter test this year.
Thank you, Swenung. There are a lot of questions in the chat. I've only seen some chat between participants. It's nice to see. But let me start to Marco van Dorst. Maybe he can open the mic and ask his question. Marco van Dorst.
Thank you very much. I was curious about the advantages you can give to electrical vehicles. And one of the options that were mentioned was free parking. But there is a moment when not 10 or 20% of your cars is electrical, but almost 100% is electrical, and then every parking is free parking. Is there a discussion about should you limit this?
Yes, obviously, and I think it's already implemented several places. As I showed you, it was required that everybody had free parking when the policy was introduced, but this was changed some years ago. So, but still, there is a rule of maximum 50%. That you should not pay more than the half of a petrol car, and I think that's a wise rule. And what we've seen in Oslo, they had both free charging and free parking, and that was a huge problem actually for the charging network, because a lot of people they use the charging spaces as parking places. And it was, even if it didn't charge, it used these spaces, so others couldn't charge. So it was almost impossible to find a public charger in Oslo only 2 years ago. But then they introduced payment for charging, and it immediately opened up the charging network. So that was also welcomed by the EV Association, that they actually introduced pricing on the charging poles. But last year they also introduced parking fees for electric vehicles. But I think they did it in a good way. They introduced a small fee for the electric vehicles, which is now I think around 20% of all cars in Oslo. So they introduced a small fee, but they also introduced the same fee as an add-on to the fee for petrol and diesel cars. And that just gave a good signal to the population that they shouldn't stop changing to electric vehicles, even if you have introduced a parking fee. And they increased it even more this year, but still they also this year they put on the same increase for petrol and diesel cars. So it's getting a lot more expensive to park with a regular petrol and diesel cars. And of course there are some opposition to this, but mainly people think it's okay to do it this way.
Okay, thank you, Swenung.
Thank you.
The next question comes from Richard Hovinga. So I would give Richard the opportunity to ask his question.
Thanks, Daniel. It was quite a while, and I just got a phone call, so I'm not really sure which question you mean.
Okay, let me see.
Sorry.
Is the free parking policy still in place?
Oh yeah, I think it's already answered. I heard that the free parking is now switching to a discount for EV drivers. So
And
that's-
another one, how did the EV Association get so many members?
Yeah, I was curious. It's impressive how many members you have, and
yeah, I think we've been quite visible in the national debate and on all news stories on EV policies. I think we are the usual ones to comment. And so, of course, we have the regular Automobile Association. They have a lot more members than us because there still are a lot more petrol and diesel cars. But I think when people switch to electric cars, I think it's natural also to switch the Automobile Association because they feel that we know more about electric vehicles, and we can also give them a good membership where they feel safe buying an electric vehicle.
okay. And are there any incentives otherwise? Charging rates discount or something?
We don't have that many membership, but we have some. We have if you have an accident and you need help with your accident or trouble with your car, you can call this company who comes and helps you. And because there are less trouble with electric cars, we can offer this service cheaper than those who have to service diesel and petrol cars. So less problems means cheaper road assistance, and I think that's it's a big benefit. And many are members because of the road assistance service.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you. The next question is from Yamani. So I give you the floor, Yamani. You can ask your question. No, then I go to the next one. John Jansen.
Good morning. I had two questions, one related to the first part. Could you elaborate a little bit more on what you mean by charging rights for apartment buildings? That's the first question. And the second I posed already. If there's enough space to load electric vehicles on an open train instead of underground facilities with people living and working above that, would you prefer loading facilities in open air?
Yeah, when it comes to the charging rights, the one thing is that when you build parking facility in apartment building, you have to ensure that at least 50% has the opportunity to connect a charger to their parking space. But in practice, we see now that all new buildings, parking spaces, private parking spaces are built with the opportunity to put up a charging box. The other thing is that if you live in a apartment, you're typically dependent on the apartment board to allow you to put up a charger. So what's happened with the regulation there is that if you come to the board and ask for charging, the board cannot say no. So they have to give you, they cannot say no to apartment owners wanting to put up a charger on their own private parking space, even if it's owned by everybody. So this is the rules that were introduced. It was actually introduced during Christmas, that the boards don't have the right to refuse owners to put up a charging box, but they have the opportunity to say, okay, it's very inefficient if you all put up your individual boxes. We can set up a smart charging smart charging infrastructure that allows everybody to charge when they eventually switch to electric cars. So you can get a no for an individual box, but then they have to immediately start building a network for all parking spaces. And when it comes to outside versus indoor, I think this is a discussion if you really want indoor parking at all. I think there's no if you have a smart monitoring charging system, you should allow for this indoor as long as people have private charging indoor, so that you don't need to go, that you're allowed to charge your car wherever your private parking spot is.
Could I ask a further question?
Yes, of course.
But how does that relate to the security of the people living above that? Because if you follow the IFV and the fire people in the Netherlands, they still say you should put all these boxes, these charging boxes, as much as possible to an entrance. Well, not everybody can park at the entrance, not private and not in public parking spaces. So what do you do about that?
Well, I think you need to put up rules that are fact-based, that allows for charging facilities indoor, as long as they are proper monitoring charging systems, so that you know that they cannot fail. But of course, all the fires you've seen, and maybe especially in the Netherlands, there has been use of regular sockets. And of course, I think that is a problem to have indoor charging in apartment buildings, and it may be expose a risk for those who are living there. But as long as you have good rules on what is allowed and what is not allowed, I think you can almost eliminate the risk of fire indoors in charging facilities.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. The next question comes from Tommy Borger. So, Tommy Borger, you can open your microphone and ask the question.
Hi, sorry, well, some laptop issues with the camera, but thank you for the question time. So I work for the gemeente Amsterdam on the loading infrastructure side, and I was very happy for your answer about the apartment right. I just followed the comment in the chat. What I wanted to ask is, when I speak to like colleagues or friends about the electric vehicles, they tell me, well, it's still too expensive. We also hope that in a few years there will be more second-hand models, so the lower side of the market will be attracted to buy. Do you foresee in the future that the prices will lower further?
Yes, definitely, because when you look at the development of battery prices, it's really a steep decline. But we also know that mass production facilities will reduce the price of making cars, electric vehicles, a lot. And when you see at all the battery factories coming up in Europe, and also the manufacturing plants being redesigned to have only production of electric vehicles, I definitely think we will see a lot lower prices. But of course, in Norway, we will also eventually need to reintroduce the VAT and maybe also a purchase tax for electric vehicles. But that's that will we don't know yet what will happen with that.
All right. Can I add one more question? A former colleague of mine, he explained that it's also about the car business. He explained that there are European regulations for the car manufacturers to make a certain amount of electric vehicles per year. Is that correct?
Yeah, this is the directive of the CO2 standards for electric vehicles, which also have, in addition to the 95 grams per kilometers, there is a mandate of having 15% electric vehicles of the total by 2025 and 30% by 2030. I still think this is a bit low. And you also have some now in 2020 and 2021, I think there are some super credit. If you produce an electric car, it counts as 2 cars. So meaning that your average bill will be lower. So this is part of the regulation for car manufacturers on CO2 standards in the EU.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you. I've seen another question from Richard Hovinga in the chat, so you can ask your question, Richard.
All right, thanks. Sveinung, at the moment, the driving an electric vehicle is much cheaper already, and still not everybody is buying one. And in 4 years, you want to become in Norway 100% EV sales. So what do you think the government will do to make that step? Is that purely because of the market dropping the prices, or are there other things necessary next to smart chargers in every place? But I was curious, do you have other policies in mind?
Yeah. I think in Norway, when you look at there's a huge difference between commercial vehicles and personal vehicles, but there's also a difference between taxation for companies owning a car and for private persons owning a car. So I think you need to have a look at these tax rules for companies, because we see that they pay a lot less VAT in practice, especially the leasing market. It's still heavily dominated by ICE cars. And also, I think the plug-in hybrids have too generous policies. And many of the plug-in hybrids, they don't pay purchase tax either, so they actually have the same benefit as the electric vehicles. So I think you need to tighten a little bit on regular ICE cars, and I think this also will be easier, because when a majority of the population have an electric vehicle, it will be easier also to increase the prices for ICE cars, and especially in cities. I think many local authorities will want to impose restrictions on cars with emissions due to pollution levels.
All right, thanks.
Okay, I've seen an interesting question from Peter Martens. So Peter Martens, you can ask your question if you want.
Yeah, thanks. Well, you hear me? Yeah. We have in the Netherlands, we are running into problems or challenges. If in an existing car park we want to install charging points, 10 or 20 charging points, we have problems with the electrical grid, and we cannot get the electricity into the car park. So sometimes we have to wait more than a year for a good connection with the grid to install those charging points. How is that situation in Norway?
Yeah, of course, we have the same problem, but when you look at the total consumption of electricity in Norway, and you imagine that everybody switches to electric vehicles, the power consumption will only increase with around 5%. So I think when you look at the required investments for increasing the capacity of the electricity grid, this is totally within reach to have a 100% battery electric fleet. But of course, some places you need to increase the capacity a little bit. And of course, there are also a lot of differences, and this may be unfair, or many may view that it's unfair that in one place you don't need to increase the capacity, and in other places you actually need to increase the capacity, and that typically they who need the upgrade, who are charging their cars, they will have to pay for this upgrade, while you don't have to pay for an upgrade if you don't need to increase capacity. So there's a lot of difficult topics, but the overall picture is that the total level of investment is quite small. It's just how do you distribute the cost of increasing the capacity among the population. That's how do you do this in a way that people accept.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Maybe I've skipped some questions, but I have to ask if there are any further questions. If
Well,
not,
I do have a suggestion.
yes.
If for emotional framing purposes, if we call ICE cars fossil cars, we emphasize that they are old-fashioned. So my suggestion is not to use the term ICE cars anymore, but call them fossil old-fashioned cars.
That's a good idea.
Okay.
Further, thank you for this brilliant presentation.
Okay, if there are
Thanks.
no further questions, I have a last one. In the Netherlands, the prices for charging are not regulated and also very diverse. As a result, users often do not know where they stand. How is that arranged in Norway? Is there perhaps something regulated there?
No, there's no price regulation here either, and it's quite interesting to see the wide range of prices that you actually have. But the most striking, I think, is the lack of information about prices on the charging stations. When I charge my car, I have no idea what the price is. I can only find out if I browse through a lot of pages on the internet, or open up some apps or whatever. So and the price difference can be from almost €1 per kilowatt hour to only 20 euro cents per kilowatt hour. So you never know the price beforehand, and there is no information about the price on the charging facilities. So I think there is a lot of improvements, both in information about the prices, but also on the payment systems, because there are, hundreds of payment systems, and you typically have to download a new app and register it as a customer whenever you find a new company that provides charging. But we don't have any price regulations in Norway either.
Okay, thank you. Bastijn put a remark in the chat. In the Netherlands, the regulator is now actively pushing price transparency. So thank you for that remark. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, if there are no further questions, I would like to close this meeting. And first of all, I would like to thank Svenu, of course, for sharing his expertise and experience with us. And second of all, I want to thank everybody today for their participation and contribution. Wish everybody a very nice day, and maybe we meet again in the future.
Also, thanks for inviting me to this. It was it's a pleasure having a presentation for you, and lots of interesting and good questions as well. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
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 Ja.